with our volunteers and our church partners within the Fox Valley where I live, and then here in Eau Claire as we begin this journey. This evening, I'm going to just take us through a few minutes of understanding who refugees are, how refugees come here, as well as how our community can be involved. You're going to hear me say this a lot tonight. Refugee resettlement does not happen in a vacuum. And at World Relief, something we really value is the involvement of our community members. Not only our community members, but also our church partners, other organizations. And so we value coming into a community and being able to share and partner with you guys in the work that we do. In no ways will this be comprehensive. I only have about 20 minutes, but hopefully it will give you a basis for kind of who we are as we move forward. And again, we'll have about 30 minutes at the end for Q&A. So I think it's important to first clarify who a refugee is, right? We hear that word a lot in news, in social media, around us. And so I have up on the screen what the definition is of a refugee. I'm going to read it and then point out just a couple key things that are important to notice. So a refugee is somebody who's forced to flee their home country due to war, violence, persecution, or well-founded fear of persecution for the following reasons: race or ethnicity, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. And it's important that we note this definition, which is also recognized internationally. This is not an American definition or a World Relief definition. This is recognized by the international community. And so refugees are not people who have chosen to leave their homes. Refugees are people who have been forced to flee for a variety of reasons that are outside of their control. We see a lot of these playing out in the world right now: the war in Ukraine, we saw it in Afghanistan, and so these are issues that many people have found themselves in that are outside of their control. And whenever I'm talking to community members, it's intentional that I've included some photos of individuals that we serve. And I think that as we see news and media, it's often very easy for us to forget that refugees are real people with real stories. Many that I have as friends, the privilege of having as friends. They have fled their homes and suffered unimaginable loss. They've left behind careers, cultural norms, and oftentimes family members, which is horrific. However, though those things are true, refugees are not defined by those past experiences. They are some of the most resilient, driven, and joy-filled people that I have ever met. And at World Relief, we believe that refugees are fellow image bearers. I work at World Relief. We're a Christian organization because I'm motivated by my faith. And I look at these people and I see fellow image bearers that I am called to love and to serve. And so as we talk tonight, there's going to be a lot of facts, a lot of numbers, but I always encourage the communities I talk to try to keep the humanity of the people that we're talking about before them as we talk about a lot of these different statistics. So starting kind of at a global scale, as we think about who refugees are and how they come to the United States and therefore here into the Chippewa Valley, there are over 35 million refugees worldwide. We've only seen that number increase over the last several years. And so this is not just a World Relief issue, it's not just a US issue, this really is a global issue that's really being talked about on center stage. And the refugee journey begins abroad. After somebody flees their home, they flee to generally a neighboring country. And many of these people find themselves in refugee camps. If you've heard about refugee camps, you might have seen pictures similar to the one that I have on screen. They're generally fairly rudimentary, with little infrastructure, generally few opportunities for education education, and more so than that, they're really a limbo state, which is not conducive to raising families, to developing as a person, to the welfare of communities. And so the UNHCR, which is the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, is an international organization that works abroad with refugees. So they are the people who are boots on the ground. They are the ones who provide protection within refugee camps, shelter, things like healthcare. But the way that we really see them most prominently is that they're the ones who do referrals for if somebody qualifies as a refugee. So they're the ones who are determining if somebody has accurate allegations that they have fled their home due to a variety of the reasons that I listed previously. I think it's important also to note that refugee resettlement really is the UNHCR's last case scenario. Their first is generally something called voluntary repatriation, which is if somebody's living in a refugee camp, maybe they say, hey, the news I'm hearing from home, not so bad anymore. I'm going to go back because I'd rather enter back into that conflict than keep waiting here in this refugee camp. The second would be local integration. So the UNHCR might determine, hey, this person, this community that they're in waiting, they can be resettled here. We're going to reintegrate them there. And then really the last case scenario is refugee resettlement. So there's several different spheres already that someone has to go through to determine if they even qualify for refugee resettlement. And then from there, Matt is going to come up and share a little bit about what it looks like for us in the United States once somebody is qualified as a refugee and is referred here, what that process looks like.
Thank you, Karen. So my name is Matt Sorens. I'm the VP for Advocacy and Policy at World Relief, and I'm originally from NENA as well. So I want to talk a little bit. I know there's been some questions and appropriate questions about the vetting process for refugees. We all want to live in safe communities, and frankly, I don't know anyone who wants to live in a safe community more than my refugee friends, who have unfortunately lost safety in their countries of origin. The good news is our government has a really thorough vetting process for refugees. In fact, the Heritage Foundation and others who have looked at the vetting process for refugee resettlement have concluded it is the most thorough vetting that our federal government has for any category of visitor or immigrant who comes into the United States. It's also been a really effective process. I won't go through each of the steps, but it is led by the Department of Homeland Security in coordination with, of course, various intelligence authorities within the U.S. and working with other countries as well. The Department of State is the one that coordinates that process as well. So there's lots of steps, including a medical exam and then a final check at the airport before a refugee is admitted into the United States as a refugee, at which point they're lawfully present in the country under the authority of the Refugee Act of 1980. So again, that's been a really important process. I interact with refugees almost every day, and I'm very glad that they've been very thoroughly vetted. I've been at this for more than 15 years, where I have a lot of confidence in that process. In fact, the Cato Institute did an analysis actually they've just updated this in the last few months, because they want to make sure, look at, there's understandably some concerns around terrorism, and especially around Islamist terrorist attacks. How could that come to the United States? They concluded that since the Refugee Act of 1980, which really established the foundation for our current refugee resettlement process, there's not been a single American life lost in a terrorist attack, an Islamist terrorist attack perpetrated by someone who came into the United States as a refugee. Now that's a really good record. We want to hold our government to ensuring that they do good vetting. That's an appropriate thing for us to expect of our federal government. But again, as Karen said, World Relief is a Christian organization, and it's really important to us that we don't just ask the question of is the government doing its job, but we also ask the question that was asked of Jesus, which is who is my neighbor? And if that's a family arriving at the airport, to be the people there to welcome them. We know we won't all necessarily share a Christian faith, that's fine. We have lots of partners from different faith backgrounds, and we appreciate that. But that is what motivates us at World Relief. The other thing I wanted to address that we think is really important is the economic impact of refugees, which again, especially at a time when a lot of Americans are struggling, is a really understandable concern. The reality is that if you look, it's a fair question, how many jobs might those refugees take? But it's only a fair question if we're concurrently asking how many jobs are they going to create. Because if you look at American history, refugees and other immigrants with other statuses have actually been a really significant part of our economic growth in this country. In fact, 45% of the Fortune 500 companies in this country were founded by an immigrant or their child, including refugees. Companies like Google, that was co-founded by a refugee who fled anti-Semitic persecution as a small child and started what's now become one of the largest companies in the world, and employs many, many, many people. Of course, there's also the fiscal concern. It's true, refugees actually, unlike most other categories of immigrants, get some assistance from the federal government when they first arrive. We'll talk a little bit more about that in specifics, but it's a relatively small amount of money. Of course, there's other funds that are expended on that vetting process overseas, on purchasing airplane tickets, although they do have to pay back their airplane tickets. They have a loan at low interest. Refugees will also qualify for some public benefits while their income levels are low enough. And it's true, if you looked at the average refugee adult 3 years after arrival, they will usually have received more from the American taxpayer, mostly at the federal level, than what they've paid in. The same is true of my 3-year-old son. He has not paid any taxes. But, of course, that's a little silly, right? We don't look at someone just at one snapshot in time. We look over a horizon of time. And when economists have done this, and most thoroughly, a couple of economists at the University of Notre Dame, and we have a fact sheet that hopefully you all got. You can go on our website and look up the study. I'd encourage you to do so. They find that 20 years after arrival, the average refugee adult has contributed an average of $21,000 more in taxes at all levels, local, state, and federal, than the combined cost of governmental expenditures on their behalf. And even if you zoom out and look at immigration more broadly, there are costs, but there are also a lot of contributions. And we think it's really important that we look at both those, and of course that's what economists do. They do cost-benefit analyses. And they quite consistently conclude that the net economic impact of refugee resettlement specifically, or some broader immigration issues, is actually positive for the receiving community. Now, to be really clear again, that's not why we resettle refugees or World Relief, because we think it's in our economic interest to do so. We do so because of our faith motivation, because we believe that these are people made in the image of God, whose lives are worth protecting, whose dignity is worth affirming. But we shouldn't be surprised, because they're people, I believe, made in the image of God, but they also have something to contribute. And we've seen that throughout American history. Turn back to Karen.
Thanks, Matt. So, a question that I'm sure you guys are all here to learn. Who is World Relief, and what do we do? So to sum it up, obviously this is to sum it, but we are a global Christian humanitarian organization. So we do work internationally in several different countries in initiatives such as poverty alleviation, economic empowerment, working in a variety of spheres with people within their home countries. We believe that it's important to be helping some of these countries to empower, to stabilize them, because in the end, most people would rather stay in their home, and if we can help those countries and empower them, then that will kind of help with that global refugee crisis as well. We're one of 10 refugee resettlement agencies within the United States. Others you might be familiar with are Catholic Charities, Lutheran Social Services, the International Rescue Committee. There is a variety of them. And then we contract with the federal government to help with the resettlement of refugees once they've arrived in the U.S. So when Matt showed that timeline of the vetting process coming into the U.S., we pick up right at the end when the plane lands in Wisconsin. And what does it look like for World Relief to be supporting and empowering refugees, boots on the ground? So we talk about 3 things that we do. Everything we do falls into these 3 buckets. Provide vital services, build just and welcoming communities, and bring people together. So obviously a very large part of what we do is working directly with our refugee clients. And we focus kind of what we do around what we kind of call our 9 stability factors. If you've moved to a new community, you know that you have to learn where your local grocery store is. You might need to find a new doctor and establish your primary care. And so those are the types of things that we do with our refugee families. When they come into the community, we're working in all of these different spheres: employment, securing housing, helping them with their legal status as they progress through that, to help them reach self-sufficiency. And primarily, our core services start and extend generally through the first 90 days of a refugee's arrival. And if you've moved anywhere new, you know that 90 days is not very long to get set up, established, and self-sufficient within your new community. And then when you add in new pieces of culture shock, this process goes on far beyond 90 days. And something that I love about World Relief, I mentioned it before, is our emphasis on community involvement. And we, as like we said, a Christian organization, often partner with churches. And we have a model called Good Neighbor Teams. And Good Neighbor Teams is a group of people, usually around 6 to 10, who commit to walking alongside a family. And we say that they might commit for 6 months, but generally those relationships go on far beyond 6 months. And the beauty of this is that, again, we as World Relief, we don't want to be here doing this on our own, right? I was talking to a community member here in Eau Claire last week, and she's worked with a variety of newcomers coming into the area. And I asked her, I said, what do you think for your community and the demographic you've been working with, like, what do they need the most? And she said, a friend. And I think that that is really true for a lot of the people we work with. At World Relief, we're kind of like the parent, and our community gets to be the grandparent. Kind of gets to fold and encourage our clients into the community in a variety of ways that we're limited in. But within those first 90 days, we greet clients at the airport. We provide basic needs, things like pots and pans, cleaning material, plates, and we also provide them their housing. We're provided funds. Those are federal funds that are per person, and we generally use them for security deposit and the first few months of rent, which, as you know, is increasing, so that those funds really don't go very far. We assist with helping them apply for public assistance, register for English, getting kids enrolled in school, eligible families enrolled in WIC. Every refugee, when they arrive, has a medical screening with a local medical provider. We help arrange those. And then provide cultural orientation around a variety of topics, how to be a good tenant, maybe American laws and customs that they might experience, and then have periodic home visits that we do throughout those 90 days. We also have some services such as employment and health that extend beyond those 90 days. So it's not like at 90 days, World Relief is like, I'm done, we're out. We continue to educate and support clients as needed beyond those 90 days. So here in the Chippewa Valley, as we are looking at growing into this amazing community, we are looking at welcoming around 75 individuals into the Chippewa Valley, likely starting in January. In the Fox Valley, this last year, we welcomed just over 300 and plan to welcome around 350 this year. Anticipated populations is probably one of the biggest questions that we've received. And in a new community, it's a little bit challenging to guarantee exactly who we expect to be welcoming. What we can say is that within the Fox Valley, these two demographics from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and from Myanmar/Burma are the main populations that we have welcomed amongst others. So again, this is not a guarantee, this is kind of our best guess as we look at just the landscape within the settlement within Wisconsin. So how can you welcome and how might you be involved? There are two main ways that we are looking for people